Hello, welcome to Record Sports Hotline Live After Dark. I'm joined as always by the one and only Keith Jackson. Keith, how's it going?
Not bad, Dan. You?
Very good, thanks. Another mental night of European football. A very odd game at Ibrox, but ultimately another defeat for Rangers.
Do you know how many times have we actually come on here after one of these European nights, and I've kind of said I don't know how to explain that. I don't know what I've actually just watched for large parts of it. I tell you what I have been watching lately, Dan. There's a thing called The Black Rabbit on Netflix, and I really advise it. Right, it's brilliant. Jason Bateman, who is superb, he's actually kind of acting a Russell Martin-esque character. Looks identical, right? Or very similar. Maybe that's a bit harsh. But seeing that first, I mean, it's brilliant, right? And it's really brilliant plot twists and all this. That first half, the first 45 minutes today, there was more plot twists in that than there was in the whole series of The Black Rabbit, which is going some. And we said before the game, you know, last night, I said, I'm not sure what to expect from this match. And even as it was, you know, going on before your eyes, I still wasn't sure what was actually happening or what the outcome was likely to be. It could have gone, I mean, Genk could have been 4-0 by half-time. Rangers could have been 3-0 by half-time. Incredible sort of refereeing decisions at times. The red card for Diamande, which is probably the one which really takes all the momentum out of Rangers. I didn't think at full speed. I couldn't believe he'd even looked at it. When you saw the slow-mo, he's made contact halfway up the shin. I think he's led with his wrong foot into the tackle. And I don't think, to pardon the pun, he's got a leg to stand on there. I think when you see it slowed down, he's got himself into a mess. I don't know why he's went the way he's went into the tackle. You can see his body's almost turning into it. And he makes contact, and it's dangerous, and it's reckless, and it's endangering an opponent. It probably ticks about 3 or 4 boxes. And that was ultimately the biggest decision of the game. I do think that, you know, I do think Rangers should have been given a penalty, except I don't, because in Scotland, I think we had been getting a better handle on the handball rule. In Europe, that's a penalty. For the referee then to go and look at it and find a reason not to give the penalty, I thought was curious and extreme. But it was just an odd old night, wasn't it? Could have had a hat-trick in the first half. Brilliant penalty save from Jack Butland. I have to tell you, at full speed, I did think that was a penalty kick. You could just tell there was more contact than the brushing of the arm. I thought there was something else, and when it gets slowed down, you see there is just a clip from Tavernier on the back of the boy's boot. One of them where he's then tripped himself up more than Tavernier's tripped him up, but there is contact. That's probably a penalty kick. But just such a bizarre 45 minutes. And then, after all that drama and excitement and, you know, to and fro, and then the second half was just so predictable. You just felt Rangers were falling out of it towards the end of the first half. And for all they had decent moments, and I thought they played quite well in the first 25 minutes. I thought there was a bit of purpose to the possession, and that's what's been lacking so badly from Russell Martin's side. But they kind of went back into their shells a little bit. I know they've got 10 men, and it's difficult at that point, but you just never really felt as if after they went down to 10 men, they were ever really likely to lay a glove on Genk, and that's really problematic, you know. And maybe the atmosphere didn't help. They're playing in front of, what was it, 38,000, they said. I think it might have been more like 34,000. And that's problematic as well. The atmosphere's not great. I think the Rangers fans, after Butland makes the penalty save, they kind of got up for it for the first time of the night. But there's just a real disconnect now, isn't there? A disconnect between the players, a disconnect between the players and the manager, a disconnect between the players, the manager, the crowd, and the banners come up, and you heard Russell Martin getting a rendition of his little theme tune at the end of the game as well, where the Rangers fans were advising them where they would like him to get to as soon as possible. I've said before, Daniel, I don't want to, there's no point, flogging a dead sheep on this one, but there's no way back for Russell Martin. And Andrew Kavanagh, he's had his boots in the ground for a few days now. He's got to get a feel for that. He sat there, you could see him kind of taking it all in, digesting it towards the end. He's got to realise, if that was what we're claiming, 38,000 tonight, it'll be 30,000 for the next Europa League game. The fans are just, the anger is starting to subside and it's becoming apathetic. And when it gets to that point, you've got a serious problem in terms of trying to make this a business model that works. So Andrew Kavanagh, some big decisions to make. Obviously, I think there is this, and I mentioned previously, Daniel, that I think there might be a temptation to double down because you can't get dictated to by the supporters. I get all this. There's also the belief that Rangers have made too many managerial changes over the course of the last few years. I think that's right as well. But you can only back the guy if you're absolutely, or as near as damn it, 100% convinced you've got the right one. Yeah. There's nothing to suggest that Russell Martin's the right guy. So this situation only gets worse. And Rangers have now got to go to Livingston this weekend. If Aberdeen, well, that's the one get out they've got, is that Aberdeen are absolutely incapable of doing anything for themselves. But if Aberdeen were, just humour me, to get a win at Motherwell on the Saturday, then depending by how many goals of a swing there would be, there's a possibility that Rangers could be bottom of the table going to Livingston on Sunday. What do you think that atmosphere is going to be?
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but just even that sentence is mind-boggling to me. Absolutely crazy.
Well,
Rangers could be bottom of the league.
But you know what? What Russell Martin really needed, he got a win against a really poor Hibs side at the weekend. And I think, he must have been hoping maybe that could look like a turning point. Maybe that could be some sort of springboard and a galvanising moment. But it wasn't a good performance. He kind of talked it up. He sugarcoated it. It was an average Rangers performance, not much better than that. Competent, you could probably say. That tonight, for the first 25 minutes, it did look as if there was a little bit of a bounce or a spring in their steps. But they're a weak lot, Rangers just now. And the only real guys that he's got, and he's still Gassama, and by the way, that's another plot twist. When he plays in the Premier Sports Cup, he's called Gassam. He's got a silent A at the end of his name. But he's rediscovered his A, and he rediscovered his form. I thought he looked pretty good. Of all the new boys, he's the one where you think, yeah, there's something there. I can see it. The rest of them, they've been downgrades in every position.
Yeah.
Chermiti, £10 million striker. You tell me that Rangers, even though Big Cyril Dessers caused a lot of frustration with Rangers fans, is there a Rangers fan out there that will say they would rather have Chermiti leading the line than Dessers or Egerman? Egerman gets sold for less money than potentially Rangers will have to pay for Chermiti. None of it makes any sense, Daniel. I'm afraid they've got themselves into a real mess. I was hoping from a Scottish football perspective for a couple of wins this midweek. Celtic at least got a draw on the road, which is not a bad return. But Rangers and Russell Martin, I'm sure he'll be in his press conference as we speak, and he'll be talking about refereeing decisions, and he'll be talking about all the things that have gone against them. But how many times do Rangers fans need to hear the same old stuff? It's not working. It's not going to work. And I'm afraid the people in at Rangers, they lack the experience. The people that are charged with making the big decisions, they lack any kind of experience of, what this environment is like, what this particular football club, what this city demands. And for that reason, they'll probably go on for a few more weeks, and it will just go from bad to worse before eventually they'll be boxed into a corner and they'll need to make a big call. But I noticed Kevin Thelwell sitting in the director's box there, looking pretty sheepish towards the end as well. I'm looking at him going, you have made so many of the big decisions that have affected that performance out in the park there tonight. I'm just not sure how he can justify any argument that he should be left in control of the next lot of big decisions that are required, because they've made a real mess of it, a monumental mess. And when you think about the kind of momentum that Rangers were building towards the end of last season off the park and the takeover, and, you know, we broke it on Hotline Live that the 49ers and Andrew Kavanagh were going to come in, and it did feel like a real moment for Rangers, and the Rangers fans understandably got really excited about it and the potential for what was coming next. They've made an absolute backside of it, Daniel. I did say, and I'll go back to it, it'll probably get worse before it gets better. And I think you're now approaching the sort of rock bottom moment of worse.
It doesn't get more bottom than bottom of the league, does it?
No, it doesn't.
We've got plenty of comments coming in, and if you're watching at home, you want to let us know what you thought of Rangers 1-0 defeat tonight, please let us know. As you can imagine, Keith, a lot of very opinionated Rangers fans tonight. Let me try and fire through a few of these. Kieran says Rangers, poor teams of the last couple of years would have put this team away easy, even down to 10 men. How can the board continue to think Martin can turn this around? It's beyond any sensible football fan. Mark says the biggest decision was Martin choosing the striker who'd never scored a senior goal. Canadian Hammer simply says...
Or Kevin Thelwell spending 10 million on him.
Aye, there's a lot of comments on Chernity, but I'll just try and rifle through these. The Canadian Hammer just asked Keith, is there any chance for Martin to be sacked before Livingston? And again, I feel
I'll answer that. No.
Drew says Russell Martin needs to go. Ali says Chernity for 8 million will be the worst signing in Rangers history. Thelwell and Martin are toast. Scott says baffling subs, poor game management. Your loyal
I actually thought on that one, the decision to put Antman on at half time was the right decision, and take off Mikey Moore, but he shouldn't have started with Mikey Moore. There's a kid there, right? Now, I don't care. People are talking about, are they contractually obliged to give this boy minutes? Is there something in the loan deal at Tottenham which stipulates that he has to play when available, when fit, he has to play? If I was Russell Martin, even if that was a contractual agreement, I'd be going down to Thomas Frank saying, look, do you know what? We're going to do this boy more harm than good. He's 18. He's struggling. He's actually going to regress. You can see his confidence is rock bottom. This is a boy that was billed as a potential world beater, a once in a generation talent down south. He's really struggling, and I don't blame him, because he's such a young kid. He shouldn't be exposed to that environment. That's mismanagement. And that I'm not saying that because he had a poor 45 minutes tonight. I'm saying it because every time I've seen him, I see a boy that is struggling with the environment. He's struggling with 50-odd thousand people growling at him. It's like nothing he's experienced, and he shouldn't have started tonight. That he's done nothing in the previous games which would say, other than if there is a contractual stipulation, why he get the nod tonight. I think it was the right substitution to make, to put Antman on at half time. It didn't really make much of a difference. Antman looked lively, I guess. And I think the fact that he was getting further up the right-hand side and trying to get forward at least brought Chernity more into the game. But there was precious few signs off Chernity either that he's going to be anywhere near the sort of 8 million to 10 million pound fee that Rangers have splashed out on. But again, we talked, Daniel, sorry, but we talked about the CV that Russell Martin had, that for some reason qualified him for this position. In the eyes of Kevin Thelwell and Greta Steinson, the guys that led the process. And that one baffles you. And then you look at, we're talking about CVs, and Chernite's a young kid that has scored 3 senior goals more than 2 years ago in a different country in Portugal. How on earth anybody can think that was a good investment for Rangers? And they might go on to do fine. But when you're selling Dessers, who scored 50 goals in a couple of seasons, you're selling him for half that tally. You're letting Eagleman go, who looks as if he could go on to become pretty decent prospect. He is a real decent prospect for a boy that has forgotten how to score goals. It's staggering. It's staggering, and it smacks of mismanagement. And Andrew Kavanagh, I know he'll probably be heading back to the States tomorrow morning. He's got a lot to think about in that flight.
He definitely does, and a lot of Rangers fans are having their say just now. William says we need to rip up 3 loan players' contracts, Moore, Aarons and Giga. And Anne insists Russell Martin was given assurances he'd be given time to get things sorted, she says, till the end of the season. He's here for at least that. Keith, right now, he'd be doing really well to get to the end of October.
Well, as one of the comments said there, to the end of this week would be a good first base for him. I think I don't think he'll. I don't think anything will happen before this weekend. I think there's, Rangers fans, and this is the thing, and this is where there is a bit of arrogance involved in the people that are making the decisions, that they think they know better than the foot soldiers that have been turning up game after game, week after week, season after season, watching the same old stuff. If anybody, if they paid the slightest bit of attention to how the supporters feel about this, well, they wouldn't have made some of the decisions that they've made. And that arrogance, that feeling that they know better, that feeling that if you've been in England for 2 minutes at whatever level, you should be able to coast it up here, it's coming home to roost. And I think I'll go back to what I said right from the start when this takeover was happening, Daniel. I do believe that Andrew Kavanagh and the Americans and the 49ers, I think in the long term, they are exactly what Rangers needed. They were exactly what Rangers required then and still require now. And eventually they'll get it right. But they've made so many mistakes based on arrogance that they find themselves in this situation. And now they're going to have to be brave. And they're going to have to make some big, big calls. And I know there's a temptation there to double down, to not pander to the demands of the support. Because if you do that, you set a precedent, it can happen again. But actually, I think it requires a bit of clear thinking, cool heads, perhaps getting back to Philadelphia and Andrew Kavanagh can go home and reflect on stuff. But he has to realise and he has to accept big, serious mistakes have been made. And if he allows it to get much worse, then eventually, and probably not long from now, the fans will be coming after him.
Yeah.
And, they'll forget about Thelwell and forget about Russell Martin because they're kind of already written off by large sections of the support. The real question is, well, you're the guy that's taking over. You're the guy that's in charge of this. Are you going to take responsibility? Are you going to take ownership? What are you going to do about this? And right now, if they just lumber on from one poor performance to the next, the fans are going to dwindle. And I go back to what I said at the start. That's really dangerous. When the anger subsides and apathy takes over, it becomes really difficult to win people back.
Robert says the same in the comments, says the longer it goes on, the fans will start turning on Kavanagh and co. James says Martin is making these players worse. Look at Kasama's decline and Ant-Man's, then you look at how bad Suter has gotten. That's just 3 players to name a few. And Luke simply says Andrew Kavanagh needs to sack Russell Martin immediately. You said earlier on in the show, Keith, that it's not working and it's not going to work. Just to round off on Rangers, do you see any way back at all for Russell Martin from this situation?
No, but I've been saying this for weeks, Daniel. This isn't new. I might have called it early. I don't know. What I did say is, before he was even appointed, when his name was first kind of came into the discussion for potential next Rangers manager, I asked a question: on what basis does he deserve to be in the conversation? What has he done that would merit him being looked upon as a genuine candidate for a job of that scale? And the only thing that I keep coming back to is that Kevin Thelwell and Greta Steinson decided, well, he managed in the Premier League. Yes, he did. And he managed one of the worst ever performing teams in the Premier League's history. But that didn't seem to matter. And that actually, not only was there an arrogance involved in thinking, well, he's managed in the Premier League, therefore he can do the Rangers job, but to totally ignore the fact that he crashed and burned and was sacked after 16 games in the Premier League, that's arrogance on steroids. And Rangers are paying a real heavy price for it right now. And they're going to have to think quickly on their feet, because if they allow this situation to drag on and get worse, the problems they've got are only going to escalate.
Absolutely. Obviously, Livingston next up for Rangers, and we'll be talking about that on Sunday. Before we finish up, Keith, should we talk about Celtic? Check in there.
Yeah.
I caught up with Record Sports' Michael Gannon earlier on today on his travels on his way back from Belgrade. He was at the game last night. That's it, Frank the Tank. And let's hear what he had to say on last night's game.
Joined the hotline now by the one and only Michael Gannon. Mick, you've been on your travels this season. We were just talking about off air. Kazakhstan, Como, and obviously Belgrade last night.
I know it's been Philly as fog the last few weeks and months. As you can tell, I'm looking a wee bit rough. I mean, it's the last night, but a flight is going at 6 o'clock. So back in Glasgow, but I 6 a.m. flight after finishing. Left the stadium about back at 1 last night in Belgrade and up the road. So yeah, maybe weary this evening a wee bit.
Well, look, I mean, I think the general consensus has been a pretty good point for Celtic. We spoke before the game, and you were saying if they could get out with a point, it'd be a good result. I think I agreed with that. Look, I don't know what you think. I'm a wee bit disappointed Celtic's behalf, just purely because I think they could have won that game.
Strange game, very strange game. I mean, I think on paper, a point in Belgrade, first game, I think it's a good point, good result. I think there'll be a wee bit of mixed emotions. I think there was a spell when I think that Red Star were there for the taking. Mm-hmm. But I also think there was plenty of spells when Celtic could have buckled and lost the game as well. So I think a point was pretty much a fair reflection on the game and a decent return. I think there was some good from Celtic and there was some not so good, some things to work on. But overall, I think it's an acceptable result. I say performance-wise, I think there's some things to work on. I think the first half wasn't great. Weirdly, I thought they started the game pretty well. Good possession, and then they had a 20-minute spell and they were pretty wobbly. I mean, they had opportunities to score and didn't take them. And then Celtic chances around at half-time, before half-time, then started half-time. Had a lot of really good chances and got one of them. Could have had another.
The 2 or 3 just before the goal were mad.
Yeah, but then obviously they conceded that's the thing. I think that's the frustrating thing with Celtic. They lost a really bad goal. Mm-hmm. I mean, a set piece. So they've been good defensively this season. They haven't lost many goals. That was a bit of a surprise to see them being so kind of ragged, that kind of goal. But listen, plenty to work on. I mean, I think it's a decent result and gives them something to build on. These 2 home games now that they can really go for. I think they have to get points on the board from these ones, I think. But yeah, so it's an encouraging start. But I still think Celtic are very much a work in progress, and I still think that the manager, Brendan Rodgers, is having to make do for some deficiencies in the squad as well. I don't think many of us would have expected Genk to start in the right wing last night.
No,
I thought young Kobe Donovan did really well.
Mm-hmm.
He was excellent, but they're still missing their first choice right back, who's an international experienced right back, Alistair Johnson. So they're having to kind of mend and make do. I think it's going to be a bit like that all the way through to Christmas. So it's whether or not they can get through this Europa League group unscathed. They're kind of having to patch things together a wee bit, I think, because of the summer of discontent in the transfer market.
How can we forget?
Yes.
We mentioned the goal there, Ian Acho. I thought he took it absolutely brilliantly. I thought it was a really clever ball from Negren. But what's your take on the Dyson Maeda situation? Keith Jackson on this show last night said that uncharacteristically he thought it was a lazy performance from Maeda. How did you see it?
See, I don't know if that's the word I would maybe use. I done a piece today about him. He's kind of like Schrodinger's striker just now. He's kind of at the club, but he's not at the club. And it's not something that's happened overnight. This is something I think you can trace it back to, if you remember it back to Japan for the birth of his third child, and the wee one never arrived, and he came back to Scotland for the final season. He didn't come back quite the same person. His form that wasn't great. Right at the end, he missed a big chance at Ibrox, missed a big chance in the cup final, and that's kind of start season very similar. And obviously, the kind of big opportunity in Almaty, right at the end as well. He had to bury, and missed penalty kick, and then another miss at Ibrox as well. Just not been great. He just looks a bit down in the dumps, and I don't think it's anything intentional. I think he's a really honest player. He's a grafter. Listen, I also think you've got to give him a bit of slack, because this is a guy who's carried the Celtic attack for 6 months.
Yeah.
Playing 60 minutes in the wing, then through the middle, or vice versa, getting flogged. I think it's just all caught up with him. I think they chuck in the fact that he put his bags packed, his locker cleared, ready to move out, get probably a big pay rise, and set a new phase of his life, and then the rug gets pulled. And I think you're only human. Doesn't mean that is kind of he's ice cold, and you think, but he's still a human being. I mean, he's like a guy who's had a bit of upheaval. I say that a new kid, probably a new life, new career move, pulled away from him, and he's not. It's obviously took its toll. He doesn't look the same player. The thing is, though, he's going to need to snap out of it, because we expect him to go, but maybe perhaps go in January. But at the moment, there's not going to be the same interest, because he's at his peak in June. He was like at the top peak of his powers, the player of the year, red hot form. I said, mentioned that tail off at the end, but in the overall package of the season, the best player in Scotland by a mile. He was in his last 2 years of his contract. The transfer policy graph, the lines were all intersecting at one point. It was time to sell him, and because Celtic made a mess of it in terms of their striker search, but now they've ended up with 2 left wingers, Jota to come back, and they've got a striker who now looks as though he's going to be the main man if he gets up to full speed. And Desmond's now he's now left in kind of limbo. Like where does he play him? Where do you play him on a weekly basis? He'll want to try and find some form to try and get interest, to get a move. It's just he's been left in limbo. He's a kind of purgatorial existence for Desmond right now, and he'll need to find a way to kind of get his mojo back, for his good and for Celtic's good. But it is a situation that's not ideal, really, with Tyson Maeda. And it's down to the kind of dithering and botched transfer window.
Just before I let you go, Mick, you mentioned obviously the 2 home games, Sturm Graz and Braga, coming up at home for Celtic. You mentioned obviously getting through to Christmas as well in the January transfer window. How equipped are Celtic to go deep in this competition? I get with only a couple of minutes left, I'm throwing that at you, but
I don't think they are. I've said this the last few weeks. I think they're ill equipped. I think that they were guilty of not preparing for the Champions League, and they've also been guilty of not preparing for the Europa League. And this would have been a good opportunity, I think, to go and make a mark in this tournament. I think they've left themselves short. I mean, I said nobody would have expected to have. I mean, young injuries have made the youngster Codon has been right, but that right side. Not to expect that right side in the first match in Europe. Not to be saying your striker is not yet, your main striker that you sign in the window isn't quite ready to play 90 minutes yet. It's October, nearly October. Yeah. Iniacho, I think, has made a really good impact. And I think there's real positive signs that he is going to be a good player, despite the way it came about. But you're going to October with a guy who's they're still talking about building fitness. Do you know what I mean? So it's like they're paying the price for the summer. I mean, listen, it's as simple as that. And Brendan Rodgers is getting forced to kind of fight with hands tied behind his back a wee bit. So if they can muddle through to Christmas, tool up in January, and then get through this group, they're doing well. I don't think it's a formality. You look at the results last night. Midtjylland beating Sturm Graz, is that right? 2-0, I think.
2-0, yeah.
I mean, you look at Braga as well. They beat Feyenoord, didn't they?
Yep.
So these are results you're maybe not expecting. So maybe these teams are decent. So it's 2 tough games. Celtic could do with 6 points. You get Roma coming to Glasgow, could do with 6 points on the board. And then they need to find somewhere on the line a way of getting around this away day kind of hoodoo. I don't think it's people are kind of like going, oh, go deep in the knockout stages. Getting to the knockout stages is going to be hard in itself. That's the first priority. Yeah, I think so. Actually, I think Celtic have badly misjudged the transfer window. As some of them had to rebuild, they haven't. They've just patched together, and they're going to pay a price at some point. And that's that. Maybe it's because I've not been to bed for 2 days and I'm a bit doom and gloom. But I think it will take every ounce of managerial nous from Brendan Rodgers to get through this period intact.
I guess we'll find out what happens in the future, Mick. It's always a pleasure having you in the Hotline Live. I'm sure I'll be pestering you again soon.
I'm away at my bed. That's where I'm heading.
Sleep tight.
Yeah. No worries. Catch you later on.
Michael Gannon there on Celtic. Keith, they're playing Hibs.
There's a man that needs a good cap.
That's why we had to pre-record it, because he's sleeping now.
He's emptied his Frank the Tank in Belgrade, I fear.
Celtic are playing Hibs at home on Saturday. But just to round off again, Keith, the big story's Rangers. They're obviously away at Livingston now on Sunday afternoon. I've kind of ran out of words for Rangers. I don't even know what's going to happen next.
Well, look, if Russell Martin's trying to find the positives, he's got a goalkeeper in Jack Butland who is coming right back on towards, his top form, even though Russell Martin tried his best to find a replacement number one for him in the summer. Suter, I know he comes in for a bit of a hard time. I still think he's Scotland's best centre half. I think do you know what I think about John Suter? I feel sorry for him. I said a couple of weeks ago, it wouldn't surprise me if he signs off in the stress. Because imagine being a centre half in that team. They are so open. They're so wide open. I think him and Cornelius have the makings of a good partnership if the team is set up properly. I think the Cornelius looks like a decent addition. One of the few that they brought in that you would say that about. They desperately wanted an upgrade for Tavernier. Russell Martin desperately wanted to get him out of the team. It looked like earlier on. He's now come to the conclusion, and it's taken him, or it certainly took him longer than most people to realise that Max Aarons wasn't it. The people, there was this, it seemed like an unholy rush, didn't it? To get everybody that was there and get them out, because I'm going to bring in all my guys, and these guys have all played in England, so that makes them better. And it's just not the case. The guys that are in the team now are playing around about the guys that Russell Martin totally thought he wanted to get out in the first place. I'm talking about your Suters, your Butlands, your Taverniers, your Raskin, Diomande, all these guys who were kind of key players in, albeit an underperforming Rangers side. They were still the kind of go-to guys in it. And Russell Martin wanted rid, and he's finding that they're now becoming his go-to guys, and it's who do we play around about them. He made a big decision not to play Majowski from the start tonight. Didn't look like a particularly good one. Everybody has to give Youssef Chermiti some time to adapt and to find his feet, but on what basis did he think that was a transfer fee that was worth paying? I still can't work it out. And I've seen very little from him thus far, albeit in very limited time on the pitch, to suggest that, that's going to prove to be a fruitful investment. Gassama, yep, there's something there. Antman, maybe. But really, what you're looking at is an industrial strength downgrade. And that's pretty good going when you consider that Rangers were so far behind Celtic before the ball was kicked, before Russell Martin, the Russell Martin first season began. So it's really difficult to see a way forward. A lot of people are saying that there are some talented players in there. They're probably looking at Asgard. I think flatters to deceive, as far as I'm concerned. Rodwell, I think, is really struggling. Has done from the start. Max Aarons, Giga, Mikey Moore looks as if he needs taken out for his own protection, otherwise he will regress. So all the things that Russell Martin and Kevin Thelwell thought that they were going to make better, they've actually made a little bit worse. And that's a really awkward position for them to be in now, that it's going to come down to the point, at some point over the next few weeks, they're going to have to be sat in front of Andrew Kavanagh and explain what they were thinking and why it's going so desperately wrong. And I think Andrew Kavanagh, and I don't think he likes the publicity, I don't think he likes the limelight, which is interesting given that he stepped into this. He was more than prepared to put himself into this situation. He desperately wanted to do it. But now he's in, and now that he's realised it's not quite as simple as some people told him that it might be, I think now's the time for big decisions. And the longer that he prevaricates, the longer that he delays, the longer he puts all these decisions off, the worse it's likely to get for him. And as I said, at that point, you wonder when the fans start turning against Kavanagh, against the 49ers, against the whole American thing. And that would be a real, I think for me, a bad mistake, because I think these guys are the right people. I think Rangers were desperate in need of a regime change and a fresh start. But I think the fans are going to have to, accept that mistakes were always likely to be made in the first wee while. But Kavanagh would be making a mistake if he thinks that, just because he's come in the door that he's going to have a permanent honeymoon. That's not going to happen. So I think a bit of leadership is now going to have to be required. And I think the fans, I think will forgive him for the missteps, but only if they see that he is prepared to front up, own it, and make the necessary decisions. Otherwise, I think it could spiral into something really difficult for all concerned.
Just before we finish for the night, Keith, obviously Livingston at the weekend, and we'll be back to talk about that at 6 p.m. on Sunday night, whatever the outcome. But do you think Rangers will win at Livingston? How do you think that's going to go?
I certainly wouldn't be putting any money on them. I just don't fancy Rangers to win anything right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because it's an anti-Russell Martin thing, it's simply what your eyes are telling you when you watch them play football. They're not creating chances, and they're really easy to play through at the back.
4 wins in 14 now.
It's what I've said for weeks now, Daniel, is it's all risk strategy at the back. And I think they're even trying to cut that out a little bit. They're not quite being as suicidal as they were for periods. And this is the other thing. You've got a guy, and the whole USP for Russell Martin was that he's got his philosophy, and it's a clearly defined strategy and how he wants the game played. Well, I'm seeing that getting ripped up, because what you're seeing now looks nothing like what he was trying to implement or roll out at the start. So that means his hair's on fire, and he's desperately trying to change. And he's given Nico Raskin the middle of the pitch where Nico Raskin wants to operate. But Nico Raskin can't do it all by himself. So, everybody is in now full-scale retreat at Rangers, including Russell Martin. And I'm sure, as I said, he'll find 100 different excuses for what happened there tonight. But the bottom line is, his team can't defend and they can't score goals. They can't create chances, but they can give loads away at the other end. And that's not a great recipe for a successful season.
It's a toxic cocktail, some might even say.
Yeah.
Well, I think for tonight, that brings to the end of Thursday night's Hotline Live with Record Sport. Thank you very much for all the comments as ever. They've been brilliant again. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be back at a more reasonable time of 6 p.m. on Sunday following Livingston against Rangers. Keith, night.
I hesitate what we're going to be discussing at 6 p.m. on Sunday, Daniel. I hesitate to think.
Goodness knows.
But that's why we love it. That's why Scottish football does what it does. But yeah, these are an interesting few days ahead, I think, for Rangers in particular.
Aye, definitely. As I say, we'll be back on Sunday to talk about it. Hope you can join us then. Thanks for watching.